My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old, and a mother just demanded that I give up my seat for her perfectly healthy child, even after I told her I have cancer. And what I did next left everyone in that waiting room absolutely speechless. If this story makes your blood boil like mine did, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I need to know there are still decent people left in this world. Let me paint you the picture of what happened in that oncology waiting room just 3 hours ago. But first, you need to understand exactly what I'm going through right now, why every single day is a battle, and why what this woman said to me cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer of the nasal cavity, stage 2. The tumor was massive, sitting there like some unwelcome invader that had decided to make my face its home. To get it removed, I had to undergo aggressive chemotherapy first to shrink it down. And let me tell you, aggressive chemotherapy doesn't just attack your tumor, it attacks everything that makes you feel human. The chemo gave me severe alopecia. I'm talking complete hair loss, not just the hair on my head, but my eyebrows, my eyelashes, everything. I looked in the mirror one morning and saw this bald, hollow-eyed stranger staring back at me. At some point, I just had to accept it and go bald, but I wear a wig now because I can't handle the stares, the immediate pity in people's eyes when they see what cancer has done to me. So there I am today, sitting in that waiting room for my follow-up appointment, wearing my wig and trying to look normal while my body still feels like it's recovering from months of being poisoned to save my life. My hands are shaking, not from nerves, but from the lingering effects of chemo. My energy is maybe 20% of what it used to be. Just walking from the parking lot to that chair had me exhausted. I'm sitting there quietly, trying to mentally prepare myself for whatever news the doctor might have for me today, when this woman walks in with her kid. The boy looks maybe 10 years old, perfectly healthy, running around with more energy than I've had in months. The woman looks around the waiting room and I can see her calculating, looking for the best seat. Her eyes land on me, and I can tell she's sizing me up. I probably look like an easy target. Young woman, nicely dressed, wearing what she assumes is just a fashionable choice of wig, not someone who's obviously sick. She walks right up to me and says, "Excuse me, my son has been walking around for a few minutes and he's getting tired. Would you mind giving him your seat?" I look up at her, completely confused. I'm in an oncology waiting room, a cancer treatment center, and she's asking me to give up my seat for her healthy child who's literally bouncing off the walls with energy. I think maybe she doesn't understand where we are, so I try to be polite. "I'm sorry, but I'm actually a patient here, and I'm feeling quite weak today. There are other chairs available over there," I say, pointing to some empty seats across the room. But this woman doesn't move. Instead, she crosses her arms and says, "Those seats don't have as good a view of the TV for my son. He's bored and needs entertainment. You're young, you can stand for a while." I can feel my face getting hot. The audacity of this woman is beyond anything I've ever experienced. "Ma'am, I understand your son might be bored, but I'm here for cancer treatment, and I really can't stand for long periods right now." And that's when she said it. That's when this monster looked me dead in the eye and said the words that will haunt me forever. "I don't care if you have cancer. My child deserves your seat more than you do. He's healthy and has his whole life ahead of him. You're probably going to die anyway. So what does it matter if you're comfortable?" The entire waiting room went silent. Every conversation stopped. Every magazine was lowered. Even the receptionist stopped typing and looked up in shock. It was like the whole world paused to process the cruelty that had just spilled out of this woman's mouth. I felt like I'd been slapped. No, worse than slapped. I felt like she had just reached into my chest and squeezed every fear, every nightmare, every 3 a.m. panic attack I'd had about my diagnosis, and thrown them in my face. The thing I was most terrified of, dying from this disease, she had just weaponized against me to get a better seat for her kid to watch cartoons. My hand started shaking harder, but this time it wasn't from the chemo, it was from pure rage. Every ounce of pain I'd endured, every moment of terror I'd lived through, every time I'd smiled through the agony to make my family feel better, all of it came rushing to the surface. "What did you just say to me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper because I was so shocked. "You heard me," she replied, actually rolling her eyes. "Cancer patients are a drain on society anyway. At least my son contributes something positive to the world. Now move. That's when I lost it. Completely and utterly lost every ounce of composure I had left. I stood up slowly, because that's all my chemo-ravaged body could manage. And I looked this woman directly in the eye. You want to know what cancer has taught me? It's taught me that there are two kinds of people in this world: those who see suffering and try to help, and monsters like you who see vulnerability and try to exploit it. My voice was getting stronger now, fueled by months of suppressed anger and pain. You think I'm going to die? Maybe I am. But at least when I do, I'll die knowing that I spent my time on this earth, treating people with dignity and respect, instead of being a miserable human being who teaches her child that sick people don't deserve basic human decency. The woman tried to interrupt me, but I wasn't done. Not even close. You see this wig I'm wearing? I reached up and adjusted it slightly, and I could see her eyes widen as she realized what she was looking at. I'm wearing this because chemotherapy made all my hair fall out. Not just on my head, my eyebrows, my eyelashes, every single hair on my body. Do you know what that's like? Do you know what it feels like to not recognize yourself in the mirror because cancer has stripped away everything that made you look like you? I could see other patients in the waiting room nodding, some of them crying. A teenage girl, with no hair and a port in her chest, was recording on her phone. An elderly woman whispered, "You tell her, honey." But you know what the worst part is? It's not the hair loss. It's not even the nausea, or the pain or the fear that I might not see my next birthday. The worst part is, people like you, people who look at someone who's already fighting for their life and decide to make their day just a little bit harder. The woman's face was turning red, and I could see her son tugging on her sleeve, clearly mortified by his mother's behavior. Your son seems like a good kid, I continued, looking at the embarrassed little boy. He deserves better than learning that healthy means superior, that young means more valuable, that someone else's suffering is just an inconvenience to your comfort. You're not just failing him as a mother, you're raising a future bully, and honestly, that might be the most cancerous thing in this room. I sat back down, my legs shaking from the effort of standing and the adrenaline of confrontation. Now, I'm going to sit in my seat in the cancer center where I'm being treated for cancer, until my doctor calls my name. If your son is tired, there are plenty of other seats. If he's bored, maybe try being a parent instead of demanding that dying people entertain him. The woman was sputtering now, looking around the room for support, but every single person was staring at her with disgust. That's when the most beautiful thing happened. The teenage girl with the port in her chest stood up and walked over to the little boy. She knelt down to his level and said, "Hey, sweetie, you can have my seat. You seem like you have a good heart, and that's worth a lot more than whatever your mom is trying to teach you right now." The boy looked up at her with tears in his eyes and whispered, "I'm sorry about what my mom said. I hope you get better." This brave girl smiled at him and said, "Thank you, honey. That kindness you just showed me? Hold on to that. The world needs more of it." Meanwhile, his mother was standing there, probably trying to figure out how to save face, when an elderly man in the corner spoke up. His voice was weak but steady. "Ma'am, I've been coming to this clinic for 2 years. I've watched people fight. I've watched people lose their battles, and I've watched people find strength they never knew they had. What I've never seen is someone attack a person who's already down. That young woman is fighting for her life with more grace than you've shown in 5 minutes." Other patients started speaking up. A woman with a mastectomy scar visible at her neckline said, "Shame on you." A man with obvious radiation burns on his neck just shook his head in disgust. The entire room had turned against this woman, united by our shared experience of suffering and our collective refusal to let her add to someone else's pain. That's when I saw something shift in her face. Maybe it was seeing her son ashamed of her behavior. Maybe it was realizing that she had just bullied a cancer patient in front of a room full of people who understood exactly what that meant. Maybe it was finally comprehending that her moment of entitlement had revealed something truly ugly about her character. She grabbed her son's hand and started walking toward the door, but I couldn't let her leave without saying one more thing. "Ma'am," I called out, and she turned around. "Your son has more compassion in his little finger than you've shown in your entire display here today. I hope for his sake that you use this moment to become the kind of person he can be proud of, instead of the kind of person he has to apologize for." She didn't say anything, She just left, dragging her son behind her, who turned back to wave at the teenager who had been kind to him. After they were gone, something incredible happened. The waiting room, which had been filled with the usual nervous energy of people waiting for potentially life-changing news, became this pocket of warmth and connection. People started talking to each other, sharing stories, offering support. The teenage girl came over and sat next to me. "Thank you for standing up to her," she said. "I've been coming here for months, and sometimes I feel like people look right through me because I'm sick, like I'm already a ghost or something. But you made me feel like I mattered, like my feelings were worth defending." I hugged this brave girl and cried for every moment I'd felt invisible since my diagnosis, for every time someone had looked at me with pity instead of seeing the fighter I'd become, for every time the world had tried to make me feel like being sick meant being less than human. The elderly man who had spoken up earlier came over and said, "You've got fire in you, young lady. That's going to serve you well in this fight. Don't let anyone, dim that light." And that's when it hit me. What that woman didn't understand, what people like her will never understand, is that cancer doesn't just happen to you. It reveals who you really are, when everything else is stripped away. And what it revealed in me was a fierce determination to protect not just myself, but anyone else who's walking this same terrifying path. That woman saw my wig and my youth and assumed I was weak, that I was an easy target. What she didn't see was the warrior that chemotherapy had forged, the advocate that suffering had created, the voice that pain had given me. Every person in that waiting room deserved to exist in that space without judgment, without cruelty, without having to justify their right to sit down while their bodies tried to heal. We deserved dignity. We deserved respect. We deserved to fight our battles without some stranger telling us our lives didn't have value. And that woman's son? He deserved so much better than learning that being healthy gives you the right to step on sick people, that someone else's suffering is just an obstacle to your convenience. You know what the truth is? We're all just temporary. Some of us might have shorter expiration dates than others. But we're all going to leave this world eventually. The question is, what kind of impact do you want to make while you're here? Do you want to be the person who makes someone's hardest day a little bit easier? Or do you want to be the person who sees someone struggling and decides to push them down further? Because I promise you this, someday, you're going to be the vulnerable one. Someday, you're going to be the one who needs compassion, who needs a seat, who needs someone to see your humanity even when your body is failing you. And when that day comes, you're going to remember how you treated people when they were at their lowest, and you had the power to lift them up or tear them down. That woman walked out of that waiting room unchanged, but her son didn't. I saw something in his eyes, a determination to be different, to be better than what she was modeling for him. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's how the world gets better, one child at a time, learning that kindness matters more than convenience. If you've stuck with me through this story, I need you to promise me something. The next time you see someone who's struggling, someone who looks different because of illness, someone who needs accommodation because their body is fighting a war you can't see, choose kindness. Choose to make their day brighter instead of darker. And if you see someone being cruel to a person who's already suffering, have the courage to speak up, because silence in the face of cruelty makes you complicit. And there are too many of us fighting for our lives who need allies, who need people willing to stand up and say, "This isn't okay." Hit that subscribe button if you believe that every human being deserves dignity, regardless of their health status. Hit it if you believe that being sick doesn't make you less valuable, less deserving of respect, less worthy of taking up space in this world. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because I want to know that there are good people everywhere who refuse to let cruelty win. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is really about. It's not about cancer, it's not about chairs, it's not even about that terrible woman. It's about the choice we all make every single day to either add light to this world or add darkness to it. And despite everything I'm going through, despite the fear and the pain and the uncertainty about my future, I choose light. Every single day, I choose to be the person who stands up for what's right, who protects people who can't protect themselves, who refuses to let illness be an excuse for the world to treat me as less than human. That's what courage looks like when you're fighting for your life. That's what strength sounds like when it finds its voice through a wig and a breaking heart and hands that shake from chemotherapy. So thank you for listening. Thank you for caring enough to hear my story. And thank you for being the kind of person who believes that everyone, Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, especially when they're fighting the hardest battle of their lives. Now go out there and be someone's light in the darkness. The world needs more people like that teenage girl, like that elderly man, like everyone in that waiting room who turned their pain into compassion. Be the person who stands up. Be the voice for those who are too weak to find their own. Choose kindness, even when, especially when, it's hard. Because that's how we win. Not against cancer, necessarily, but against the cruelty that tries to make our suffering worse.